All right, well, welcome to another edition of Faces of Community. Now, I do this exercise to get everyone's energy up, and the people who've been in this room have probably heard it too many times. So let that go, right, for a bit. But we need to make sure at 7:30 p.m. at night, until your kind bars come in, we do have, positive encouragement and a level of enthusiasm. So are there any birthdays in the house here? Anyone's birthday? Today, yesterday, day after tomorrow, last month? Okay, that may not work. So I may have to do the same thing. No one's birthdays, or no one's owning out. Let's see, about 100. What is your name here? Your birthday today? No, that doesn't sound authentic. All right. Do you have a birthday? Last Friday, March? Yeah. March what? 23rd. What is your name? Curly. Carolyn, Kelly, Curly? Caroline. All right, well, let's do this. We had Ben Zander, a great TED talker who came to our class and said, when you sing, give 100% to it. Sing with your hearts, minds, and voices. So for Caroline, wait. On three. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Caroline. Happy birthday to you. All right, well done. Caroline, you get to be our first speaker. But I'm okay. But you can. Do you have anything to share today?
Not particularly.
Okay. It was about a week ago, right? Okay. All right. Well, let's move on with the show. We have, once again, an incredible group of, I shouldn't say characters, they are characters, but just incredible group of individuals who will be reciting their speeches again for you tonight. I've been to a few TEDx's as part of my job. I enjoy doing it. And I go to TEDx's, and I feel the world has changed. Traditionally, you have a speech, and it goes on for 18 minutes, 20 minutes. The standard for TED is 18 minutes. Well, 18 minutes is a lot of time today. To keep people engaged, speaker after speaker for 18 minutes is just difficult. And I try to share the feedback with some of the organizations here, and sometimes I go to these events and they empty out at the halfway point. The challenge here is to do more with less. And each of these speakers are going to have a max of 5 minutes with you. 5 minutes. That is like hearing a song. Right? You're on the plane, you have a playlist going, you have 10, 11 songs that we will hear today, each with its own melody, each with its own lyric, and each with their own unique pathos. And I'm absolutely delighted to get the show on the road. I stall a little bit because people trickle in, but we're also meeting right after spring break. So this is an absolutely wonderful turnout for after spring break, but we also want to make sure that we get you out of here by 9 o'clock as is promised. Okay. Faces of our Community, this is our 6th version. The concept for this came out of the class. My teaching team and I are privileged to hear speeches from some of the brightest, most motivated people from around the world. They do this with the seriousness and structure of a course. And the first 3-4 semesters, I was listening to these speeches and I said, wow, this is amazing. And I can't believe that it's just 20, 25, 30 individuals who get to watch this speech. So let's get this out in a forum that reaches a larger group. And that's how this began. This is version 6. This was version 5 in the fall, and we have many of the stars coming back today in the audience. Now, not a lot of people know about this, doesn't get the marketing that it does, but last time the president of the university said that he would come here for a few minutes. I was bugging him a few times. I'll be here for a few minutes, sat there for the entire time and did not leave. So I'm really hoping that many of you find the motivation, amongst a lot of work to do, to really give our 11 speakers a shot till the very last one. Okay. This is some of the faces of community right before. The thing with each of these individuals I look back is they've expressed something very core to their personality, to their life in 5 minutes and with a group. And I look back at these pictures and their stories come back to me. Faces of Our Community started in 2015. This is another event that we were hoping for this year called the Fletcher Ideas Exchange, but for logistical reasons, it has been pushed back to next year. But this is also a forum where you can speak not just with student peers, but you also get a chance to speak alongside faculty and guests. And then finally, this is our Faces of Community right now, but the end of next month, we will have a Faces of Community for the Friedman School. After teaching this course 18 times in the past 5 years, I also had an opportunity to teach this course at the Friedman School of Nutrition. The difference there was that this was a required course for nutrition communication students. At the Fletcher School, this is an elective course. It doesn't really fulfill any requirement. As Mary says, try and get this to fulfill more requirements. And I think it's better to get people who really want to take this intervention to come in. At the Friedman School, this was made it a required course for the nutrition communication students. So as Rachel will attest, on the first day, they're like, why in the world are we here and who is this person? But I think towards the end, they came together really well. And there's something, again, very powerful in having people who've committed themselves to communication to deliver speeches. So that'll be happening at the end of next month. Back to our event today. These are our stars. And even before they start, let's please hear a warm round of applause for our stars for tonight. All right? I asked for this for a specific reason. Traditionally, you go to public speaking events, and you have people who have volunteered throughout their lives, right? They've enjoyed hearing themselves speak. They go out, they say, I want to speak where I can. It's a TEDx event, that's great. In this case, most of the students who have enrolled for this course have felt that they wanted to work on their public speaking. And to virtually everyone here, the thought of being in ASEAN Auditorium speaking to a group of strangers was completely alien. So the fact that they've delivered something in class and then had the courage and the conviction to come out here and deliver their 5 minutes of gold to you is much appreciated. And you'll see this for yourself. A good range in the speeches tonight. We're going to hear several core value speeches. There are a few reframing speeches, which is just there's a certain frame with which you look at something and then you reframe it in a new way. There's one adaptive leadership communication speech by our cross-registrant from the Harvard Kennedy School. And I'll give you a bit of context for it. It may not be self-contained, but it's a very, very important skill set to have when you face a situation at an organization that is going through a challenging time. And then we have also a tribute and / eulogy that someone is going to deliver for the first time here. So a mix of speeches that you'll hear over the next hour and a half. And just some themes, right, for this set of speeches. The first couple of speeches, you'll see a theme of adversity and making the most out of adversity. I think this applies to public speaking in general for students who commit to taking this intervention. There is something that makes them feel uncomfortable, right? But how can you take this adversity and turn it into opportunity? There is a good deal of introspection that has gone into each one of these speeches. I feel graduate school has changed from the past decade and a half. You can get knowledge in books, but what you can't recreate as easily is having real set of eyes, real deadlines, and a need to introspect in real time and deliver something back. And I salute all of you for really having gone through that introspection in your life. They found a connection, right? Connection to the audience here. And connection, it has details, right? How long should your speech be? The speed of speech is 2.5 to 3 words a second. In 5 minutes or 300 seconds, they have about 800 words to create an impact. How do you make each line golden? How do you make it flow? I hope you'll be entertained by these speeches, but you'll also have something in your repertoire to push ahead. And then finally, how are you able to relax? Right? Most people, their body starts doing things it doesn't normally do when you have so many eyes on you. Right? How do you find that intensity, but also find a way to relax? And that gets you to your excellence. The challenge here is that once in the semester, you deliver something that you'll be proud to show generations. Right? And that's hopefully what you're going to see. These are the 3 things we asked them to look at: logos, ethos, pathos, fancy words for content, connect, and content, credibility, and connect. The middle one, credibility. Why are you the right person to deliver this message? We asked them to make eye contact, eye connect. So if they stare at you before they start speaking, you'll know what it's for. We asked them to think about sound bites, self-contained phrases in their speeches that would share the summary of what they had been speaking about. Critical in press interviews, media interviews, but also in speeches. And most importantly, to have fun. Just a little more fun every time they step on stage. So with that said, are we ready to have some fun and get the show on the road? All right. Just for the speakers, I've gone out and gone to Costco and bought a bunch of kind bars. Just as we get this going, I'm going to give a few kind bars to the most enthusiastic crowd members to start with. All right, so for a cheer, are we ready to get the show on the road? All right, Molly gets one here. Pataria, you get one back there. Okay. All right, are we ready to get this show on the road? All right, Beatrice, you get one here too. And one I'm going to cheat, even though I didn't hear it, but I have to tell you, this is a very special day for me. When I was a freshman in college about 4 years ago, okay, one of the first people that I met was my RA in college, and he was one of the most vibrant, amazing, kind individuals I have ever met. I came all the way, as an overseas student from India, I came all the way on a 24-hour flight, and this person really warmed my heart and was a great support. I had no idea, but 4 or 5 years later, or a couple of decades later, this person happens to be a faculty member in Boston at the Harvard School of Public Health, and is here. Howie, I'm so delighted that you have come to this event. Okay. Yeah, thank you. This is for you. Okay. With that, we will get the show on the road. Faces of our community, our very first speaker tonight. I'm delighted to start with someone who is an absolutely incredible individual, a versatile individual, and also a teaching assistant for the class this semester. Britta Wilhelmsen is from Ann Arbor, Michigan. You say go blue, right? For the University of Michigan. Are they in the Final Four right now? They're in the Final Four. Great. So she's from the University of Michigan. Britta, in college, started developing a love for international affairs. No pun intended. International relations. Okay, sorry. And had an interest in Latin America. Britta spent a year in Argentina and then decided to come to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy to further this interest. She has also organized the Latin dance performance at the Latino Night recently and is just coming back from Mexico. In this speech, Check In with the Trees, is a core value speech that she was able to deliver in such a creative manner that it created a huge impact. And I'm absolutely delighted to start our show with Britta Wilhelmsen. Please.
When I was 8 years old, I had the best view in the house, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't because my bedroom window overlooked my mom's flower garden, which always attracted a nice group of bunnies for me to watch around 9 a.m. every morning, although that was an added perk. But no, my favorite part about my view was the 3 tall ash trees that loomed over our yard like gentle guardians. They always looked a little bit different depending on the day, and it became kind of a ritual for me to check in with them when I woke up every morning, to see which way they were leaning, what the weather was like, if the leaves were green or orange or gone. The trees told me what kind of day I was going to have. I did this for a long time, but then somewhere down the line, life happened. I started forgetting to check in with the trees. There were days I realized I didn't know what the weather was like because I was in such a rush to get through it. When I eventually moved to Chicago many years later for a full-time job, my morning commutes became so routine that my surroundings didn't register at all with me anymore. The people laughing on the train, the city whizzing by, the smell of coffee when I stepped into the office, all these things were there, waiting to be acknowledged, but I didn't notice or even really care. I was on autopilot. As we get older, it becomes even easier for autopilot to take over. Between the daily work grind, millions of unread emails, family commitments, we forget to stop and breathe. We forget that outside of our own personal bubble, there's a whole world happening around us. And it's often the little things that get lost in the chaos. Autopilot is a dangerous mode to travel on, and I was in the red zone. Luckily, my wake-up call did come, and it came in the rather unexpected form of a 65-year-old Peruvian shaman named Ivan. I met Ivan on a trip to Peru with my parents. He was actually our tour guide for Machu Picchu. And as we started down the Inca Trail, one of the first things that he showed us was a bright purple orchid. Its name in Quechua, Ivan taught us, was Wiñay Huayna, forever young. Ivan was Wiñay Huayna. Within an hour of meeting him, we realized that he had very poor English, but he had 3 go-to phrases. For example, please, 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 when he wanted our attention. And my personal favorite, as he admired the view below us, a very simple life. At first, I honestly thought that he was putting on a show to get a bigger tip from us. How could one person be that excited about everything they saw? A centipede on the ground required a 10-minute speech on the struggles of insect life. He practically beamed in excitement at every new corner we turned. Please, 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 he said to us, que hermoso, my country, life. He snapped pictures of everything. And when we finally reached the sun gate and we caught our first glimpse of Machu Picchu in the distance, he threw back his head in amazement before he turned around and he told us that he had been taking tourists up that mountain 5 days a week for 36 years. I was shocked. I realized in that moment that none of it was fake. This man genuinely looked at his world the same way that my 8-year-old self did. And he had walked that exact path 8,640 times. So when I left Peru, I took the concept of Wiñay Huayna with me. The picture of the bright purple orchid hangs over my bedroom in my childhood home as a reminder to pause, to breathe, to not take myself too seriously, even in grad school, and to remember to check in with the trees. Thank you.
Checking in with the trees, 5 minutes. Britta Wilhelmsen. As you can imagine, you start off with thinking about your core value and you come up with a list and then you get to something that you can talk about, but then also something that has a story that will connect. And that's what Britta did with this. Right after the speech, it really got me thinking, right? As I hope it started the process for you. Checking in with the trees to opportunities from disadvantages. Our next speaker is Skylar Skogan. All right. Yeah, all the positive energy is appreciated. Savant, I heard you, so you get a kind bar too. All right, are you ready to catch? Here we go. There we go. All right, so you got some fans here, Skylar. That's because you've been here for, what, 62 years? How long have you been at Fletcher? Okay. No, but at least 2 years. I had the pleasure of listening to the speech, watching it 2 years ago. Skylar was in the half-semester course of Arts of Communication. I was a standout student in the class. I had to take a break, came back. He's got a very interesting background. He's from Park City, Utah. Yeah, from Utah, but his family has ties to Israel. He spent quite a bit of time in Israel. In fact, he served in the Israeli Defense Army for a few years, and his time coincided with the trouble in the West Bank in 2014. And like many of you, loves to travel. I think your childhood ambition was to be a basketball star, and then you said, and then you only grew to as tall as you are, but is a great athlete, has done a, well, he wrote that in his introduction, so I'm just repeating it. And Molly, didn't he, no, he did a Spartan race with you too, right, Britta? So that's a lot about Skylar now. His speech today is a reframing speech, but it also has some core values that he will share. Let's give it up for Skylar Skogan.
So a few months before I came to Fletcher, which to us second years seems to be about 1 million years ago at this point, I was with one of my childhood best friends in the mountains of Utah, where I'm from. We were sitting around the campfire, talking about life, and After 5 or 6 beers, you tend to be a little bit more candid than usual. And so the question was asked, what has been your greatest disadvantage in life? Not your greatest weakness, your greatest disadvantage. My friend said it had been his parents not being at home enough, working all the time, leaving him to a lifetime of not a lot of guidance as a child. But it had made him fiercely independent, which is a great strength. Mine, I said, was my mother's condition. Growing up, multiple times a week, I would be awakened to her screams in her sleep, bemoaning the demons of her past. Other times, she would break down hysterically in the grocery store, while driving, while watching television. As soon as I could drive and she couldn't leave her bed and my dad wasn't home, I would frequently go to the pharmacy to pick up her haul of antipsychotic medications to treat her manic depression, also known as bipolar disorder. For a long time, I was angry that my mom was afflicted by such an unwarranted condemnation of her health. Angry that my family had been dealt these cards. But now, I've realized that was futile. Because everything I have ever done in my life, and everything I ever will do in my life, is a byproduct of my mother's disadvantage. Every one of you in this room has some affliction or disadvantage that you wish you could just do away with. Take a pill or have surgery or just heal quickly. Fortunately, the world doesn't work that way. Yes, I said fortunately. There's a reason that human evolution has not eliminated depression, bipolar disorder, or learning differences from humans. Because the strength and understanding that come from those give you a view of the world and creativity that is very unique and second to none. Some of the greatest minds in human history, entrepreneurs, artists, leaders of nations, have been afflicted by such conditions. Martin Luther King Jr., J.K. Rowling, John Lennon, Abraham Lincoln, just to name a few. It is said that those with depression think about events 4 times as long as the average person, leading to, yes, maybe greater torment, but also tremendous understanding and depth, nuance as to events. So quickly growing up, I had to adjust to my mother's condition. I had to be more perceptive to read when she might have an event so it doesn't play out in a more public location. I was forced to be perceptive in a way that not a lot of children had to be. But it paid off, at least professionally. When I was accepted into the internal analytical unit of the Israeli Defense Forces Military Intelligence Directorate, where you were forced to look at many issues and threats comprehensively to find details that others might have missed. If it weren't for my mother's condition, there was no way I would have been qualified to be in that position. So yeah, it sucked to have a sick parent. It hurt to miss my 7th grade dance because on the way over, my mom had an episode and we had to turn back. But I wouldn't have it any other way because her disadvantage, the byproduct of that, has truly been my advantage and my greatest strength in my life. So I ask all of you to look at your own disadvantages or those of your family members and see how it has truly become your advantage. Thank you, and I love you, Mom.
Staying with this theme of making the most of adversity. From Skylar to Andrea. Okay. Andrea Goldstein, 2nd year MALD here, studied history and classics at the University of Chicago, was active duty in the US Navy from 2009 to 16. One of only 2 women in your cohort, right? And she's been a trailblazer in general. She's studying sort of social and political equality and also women in armed conflicts. Andrea is also on the first day of class brought in a level of energy. She's just come off a flight from Mexico after flying for almost 14, 16 hours here and has agreed to speak at this event. Her speech also touches on adversity, and she has her own story. 5 minutes for Andrea Goldstein. Okay, thanks.
3 years ago, I was serving in the Special Operations Unit
alongside Navy SEALs. We powerlifted and ran along Coronado Beach every morning, and we were invincible. One morning, I woke up with back pain so severe I could barely move. Weeks went by, and the pain barely improved. Where there had been invincibility, there were now limitations. As the most senior woman in the command, I would periodically close my office door so that my sailors wouldn't see me doubled over my desk in pain. As the most senior woman in the command, I was afraid that any weakness or failure would reflect poorly on any women who might ever want to come to the unit. I had been the first of my kind, and I did not want to be the last. One morning, my boss, a Navy SEAL with a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, opened my office door to find me lying on the floor. I was stretching, trying to get some kind of pain relief. He extended a hand and helped me up. After we'd finished talking about what he'd come to my office to discuss, he said, "You're not doing your sailors any favors by not taking care of yourself." A SEAL team, as it turned out, was the best place this could have happened to me. Our compound had its own physical therapy clinic, and I was far from the only one living with invisible chronic pain. This, in fact, made me more like the SEALs, not less. And they taught me that vulnerability is part of the warrior's soul. After months of x-rays, painkiller cocktails, including one that put me in the ER, MRIs, and blood tests, I still didn't have any answers, but I was on the path to a diagnosis, and my pain began to be managed. Over a long weekend in October 2015, I went to go visit a friend in Utah. During the 3-hour drive from Salt Lake City to Moab, we periodically got out of the car to stretch because it was just too painful to sit for that long. You see, my friend has an autoimmune disease called ankylosing spondylitis, which causes arthritis in the spine. And although I didn't know it yet, so do I. The next morning, we got up early and hiked through Arches National Park. We hiked to the highest point in the park, overlooking the iconic Delicate Arch. And I asked myself, what else am I capable of that I don't even know about yet? One day, we won't be able to climb mountains. But chronic conditions force self-care. And self-care gives us the opportunity to take a new normal and wield it into a superpower. Many of us live with chronic conditions or love someone who does. For many of us in this room, the greatest healthcare challenges of our lives haven't even happened yet. But there will be days when we can't get out of bed. So what about the rest of them? Adversity grants the opportunity to make the most out of life. Create art. Win championships. Explore the universe. Command an army. Lead a nation. Diagnosis and injuries are not setbacks, but springboards that force you to focus on what drives you. They make you more of who you already are. A shift in capability is an opportunity. What will you make with it? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Now, from inspiration to introspection. Okay. Let me also tell you, these speeches that you'll hear 5 minutes, they may have an impact. You may want to share some thoughts. We'll have 2 opportunities for that right before the break and then towards the end. So if you want to ask any questions to our speakers or share some thoughts, there'll be an opportunity for that. Now, Arkady Howe joined us last semester as a Masters of International Business student with quite a bit of experience. He had worked for 4 years in consulting. He had then moved to Vietnam with his wife, who is from Vietnam, and they said, we'll find some work and live here. A number of good causes that he's worked on. He then moved back to the US, and with his wife, who's now in med school, lives in Worcester. That's how we say it, right? Worcester. By the way, is she here today? Is your wife here today? Okay. Yeah. So Arkady has been in our program for the past year now. Arkady was, I think, the pure example of a genuine team player, someone with a warm heart, always ready to help others around. And really, you made my teaching so much more enjoyable by the compliments and little things that you did. For Arkady, this experience was an introspective one. He delivered a couple of speeches. For his final speech, he really went out of his way. He really put a lot of thought into something very important in his life and gave us this, a letter to his father. Okay.
Dear Ba, we shared a special Father's Day this past June when Christina and I visited you and Ma in Taipei. By chance, we picked up the Clayton Christensen reader for you at the airport, remembering only that you'd repeatedly praised the HBS professor over the years, but not realizing that his words would help resolve my subconscious dissonance over forgiveness. As I started to read your favorite essay, How Will You Measure Your Life, to you at your bedside, I understood why his message resonated with you as an EMBA professor. He talked about holding to our principles 100% of the time, and how we're motivated not by money, but by meaningful opportunities for learning and growth. But then, we started to read his ideas about family. How, if we're not careful, we might overinvest in our careers and underinvest in our families. And a battle, abruptly and unexpectedly, began to surface inside me. I reluctantly recalled that you moved to Taiwan when I was in elementary school to pursue your own career goals. Until a year and a half ago, I saw you about twice a year and witnessed how hard Ma worked to manage everything at home. Were you thinking these same things as we read together this past Father's Day? One of the few we've spent together, I wondered. The answer to this question felt trivial in the moment, considering everything that you and our family have endured over the past year and a half. But the impact of our unspoken words has remained with me ever since. To recap, the morning after Trump was elected, Joey called me, my brother. Ba had a serious spinal cord injury during his business trip in Hong Kong. Christina and I flew to Taiwan after you had surgery and were medically evacuated back to Taipei. We visited you in the neuro ICU, where I barely recognized you at first, lying frail and limp and surrounded by wires and tubes. You couldn't talk because of the trach in your throat, and you couldn't move anything below your shoulders. Since your accident, you and we have endured harrowing experiences as well as major triumphs. There was our meeting with the neurosurgeon in which he quickly, dispassionately, and most importantly, incorrectly informed us that your spinal cord injury was complete. You were quadriplegic, and you might rely on a ventilator indefinitely to breathe. On the other hand, there was the time they successfully tested the speaking valve that ultimately gave you back your voice. "What is your name?" the doctor asked in Mandarin. After coughing for several minutes, you responded, "He Xiao Tai," as I burst into tears of joy. We've since shared many tears together, and the sum total of these experiences and this past year and a half has guided my understanding that forgiveness is not a definitive step or a final destination. Rather, forgiveness encompasses, but does not change, the past, and continuously informs the future. I am inspired every day by your forgiveness and acceptance of your new circumstances, and by how hard you continue to work throughout this arduous healing process with fierce determination. And I want you to know that I am in my own process of doing the same. Love, Arkady.
Arkady, a love letter to my father. Thank you. Arkady, I know how much time you put into this and how much has gone into this speech. I will share that the first time in class, as you can imagine, this was emotional for him. And towards the end, he didn't really get through it. And he said that's fine, but he came back and he said, "No, you can count that for the grade, but let me do this." And he came back on the last day of class. And thank you, you've inspired us. From Arkady to another participant with an incredible background and a set of interests, Lindsey Smith. Lindsey is a joint DVM MA candidate. So she's a doctor of veterinary medicine at the Cummings School at Tufts, and also as a mid-career MA candidate here. A very interesting combination, right? Like many of you here in the group, a stellar academic career in the past, studied ecology and biology, did some research in Ecuador. From the first day in class, you've been extremely diligent and really positive for our group. You've been synergizing us. This is a speech that Lindsey picked for reframing. And it also deals with something very close to her heart. So let's watch her reframing speech entitled "Beyond the Clinic." Please, Lindsey.
I'm going to describe 3 people. The first is Catherine. She's in Ghana, trekking deep into the rainforest in search of bats and chimpanzees to take blood samples from. And when she returns to town, she plans on visiting a local market to determine whether the local bushmeat being sold there is exposing the public to hemorrhagic fever. Tim is the second person. He works in a laboratory, and he's researching a cancer drug that is finally on the cusp of entering clinical trials after several years of research. And then there's Kate. She sits in the Senate in DC, and she's working on advancing environmental public health standards and climate change policy. And after researching these topics for about a year, the senator's team is finally moving forward. Very different day-to-day jobs, yet one unifying feature. These 3 wear different hats, but the rest of their outfits are the same. So what is it that Catherine, Tim, and Kate all have in common? Each one of them is a veterinarian. I know what you're doing. You're picturing the last time you took your dog or cat to the local vet, and you're probably feeling a bit confused. And that's fair. I bet that 95% of the general public's only experience with a veterinarian occurs when they take their pet to that local practice. Whether it's for something like a routine checkup, a surgical procedure, or when their four-legged friend is just seeming a bit off. And this is a part of the profession that I sincerely love. It's a very noble one where you can truly make a difference in the lives of people and animals every single day. But it's not the only place where a veterinarian is capable of making a difference in the world. So I'll bring you to my own path and my own pursuits. Perhaps it'll provide some clarity for people who have asked me questions like, so what is it exactly that you want to do with your career? And how on earth do these two degrees tie together? They're questions that I've answered so many times that I've really honed my elevator pitch by this point. But seriously, a future veterinarian in a graduate school of international relations and diplomacy, sometimes I feel like a fish out of water. But a fish out of water with purpose. As a veterinarian, I want to work in a One Health context. And allow me to briefly paint that concept map for you. 75% of emerging diseases like Ebola originate in animals. Climate change is altering mosquito patterns, and it's bringing new diseases to new places. And with overpopulation, communities are pushing further and further into untouched ecosystems, and this is increasing the chance of contact between humans and livestock with wildlife that are harboring thousands of unknown diseases. This connects our health with the health of animals and the environment. And that's what One Health is. It's the recognition that human, animal, and environmental health are interconnected and must be promoted together. It also poses huge implications for environmental policy. And this is ultimately where I'd like my career path to go, at that intersection of global health and environmental policy. So One Health, it's a framework and an initiative that's existed in the realms of global health and conservation for the past 20 years or so. It's recognized and supported by organizations like the World Bank, UNDP, World Health Organization, among many others. And for veterinary medicine, this holistic approach to health makes for a multifaceted profession. So if you take anything away from this speech, let it be this. Think of a veterinarian in that One Health context. Bring that human with the white coat and the stethoscope out of that local practice. Veterinarians are laboratory researchers. They're wildlife conservationists. They're science policymakers and advocates. But perhaps most importantly, as biosecurity specialists, they just might be the most qualified people standing between us and the next pandemic. Thank you.
And thank you, Lindsey. See, 5 minutes, and you just feel we know you so much better, and I feel we have a new view of vets, right? All right, so right in the middle of the program, one speech stands between you and Kind Bars, and this is an important one that I ask for your attention and also ask you to take on a role. Now, in our class, we have self-contained problem solution, reframing, value speeches. Over the past couple of years, we've also been challenging some of our participants with an assignment on adaptive leadership and its communication, something that I feel will be powerful and important in many of your lives. Right, and for this, I need to give just a context before Dan Bartlett, our cross-registrant from the Harvard Kennedy School mid-career program. We won't use that against you. Okay. We'll be sharing 5 minutes. Now, this class is one of the most popular courses at the Kennedy School, and in a nutshell, it is talking about a situation in an organization where leading from the front may not work. The organization is going through a difficult time, and you need to change the cultures, ideas, and values of this organization. And the way you can do it is by becoming a catalyst who is both likable, but also pushes people and raises the temperature. If you don't raise the temperature, you will not cause change. And if you're likable, people won't listen to you. So in this setting, we had a case. This is the one reading on, if you want to do like one reading to understand the concept, this would be it. But here's the case. Imagine this could be any of you. Right? You've taken your first job out of Fletcher, maybe to pay off some debt. You've gone and worked in consulting, banking, wherever. And you said, this is, okay, I've paid off some debt, but I want a little more meaning from my job. And you find a traditional nonprofit organization serving people with developmental disabilities, but one that has never seen PowerPoint before. They've never had consulting, Excel, reports, but they serve 2,000 clients with disabilities. This is a real organization. Some of the names, labels have been changed. But there was a case here where you come into this organization to make a difference in the lives of individuals, but this organization is headed towards bankruptcy at a current rate, given that funding challenges have come up. Now, in this case, you were a 3-month consultant, and now you're 3 months into the organization. Half the group is like, this is great. Here's a Fletcher, Harvard guy who's come in. He'll take us, he'll lead us to a new reality. And the other half is like, who is this person? What does he know about disabilities? Why have we created a position for him where we might be laying off some people? And they're still trying to figure him out. So he's got this dual challenge of being likable, but still making sure that he pushes you to give the work back to you, because the work will have to come from you, and he does not have authority. Okay. Now, I've said a lot. Imagine this simply, that you have a nonprofit organization that's been running for 50 years. It's at a very critical stage, and this person has been planted by the board to help you work going ahead. Now, Dan has asked the executive director for a 5-minute speech at a bi-monthly town hall meeting for the staff. The staff is still trying to understand, who is this person? What is he going to bring to our organization? If he had 5 minutes at this time in this organization, what would a speech look like? Okay. Let's please welcome Dan Bartlett. Okay.
Good evening. I've had the opportunity to meet and to work with many of you. I want to start by thanking you for that great opportunity. Particularly, I want to thank Harold and the rest of the senior staff for allowing me to open tonight's meeting. Now, I realize I'm the new guy. Many of you might wonder what brought me here from Cambridge. I don't have particular expertise in exercise management or working with those with disabilities. I can tell you what brought me here from Cambridge is the amazing impact that this organization has had on so many tens of thousands of lives over the past 66 years. TCD first came to my attention through the Brainstorm program, the work that you do with those with traumatic brain injury. As a veteran of both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I have seen the impact that TCD has had on my own friends' lives. It's shattered their lives. But the work that you do, I've also seen bring those lives back together, and it was so motivational. That led me to do some research about TCD, and I learned about your founder, Janet Palmer, whose vision was making the lives of people with disabilities just as good by allowing people with disabilities to do everything that everyone else does. And that spoke to me very deeply. In 1952, one of TCD's first patients was named Joe Ball. Joe attended the Fleischacker Pool Building when TCD was there on the other side of the San Francisco Zoo. Joe was a teenager who had cerebral palsy. In those days, folks with cerebral palsy didn't really leave the house. They were schooled at home, and their lives maybe were spent reading books and things like that. But TCD, this amazing recreational facility, was created, and Joe created a life for himself here. He, for the first time, had a sense of purpose and had a sense of self-dignity that he didn't have before. In a remembrance of Janet, he remembered how incredible and how different his life was after finding TCD. Much like Joe, my mother-in-law has cerebral palsy. And although she lives on the other side of the country and has never participated in TCD's programs, I know for a fact that the innovations made here in the care for the disabled has had a tremendous impact on her life. And for that, I am tremendously grateful. And I'm grateful for the work that you do. So what can I bring to this amazing organization, to your already amazing team? Well, I can bring passion, and I can bring expertise in public policy and strategic planning. It's the public policy piece that I want to talk about tonight. As many of you know, much has changed here in California since the Lanterman Act was passed in 1969. The days of the state funding grant requests for nonprofits are likely gone for good. So nonprofits like ours have one of two choices to make, one of two paths to take. We can either stay on the path we're on, hope that we've been through tough times before, we'll get through them again. I fear that that will lead to diminishing budgets, to increased costs and atrophied service, and possible bankruptcy. The second path is to adapt, to improvise, to overcome, to identify additional funding sources. As you all know, I've been working on a strategic plan. Many of you have contributed to that plan, and I am grateful, but I need your help. I need us to continue this conversation. What I've heard so far is that there's three areas that we should be thinking about. One is, are we strategically investing our precious resources in the appropriate programming? The second one is, are we utilizing information technology as best as we can to improve our business practices and to improve our operations and programs? And the third one is, are we managing our human capital appropriately? Are the right people in the right positions to best serve our clients? Now, I know that the innovation, that the thoughtfulness exists in this room to answer those questions, to ensure that TCD can continue to thrive into the future, and that Janet Palmer's vision of people with disabilities, like those that suffer from TBI, like the wounded warriors, or those with cerebral palsy, like my mother-in-law, can continue to do all the things that everyone else does. Friends, this organization means too much to too many to not heed this call. Thank you.
5 minutes at a town hall meeting. The first time you see this person. 3 difficult tasks, right? He has to gain your trust. He has to be likable. He has to push you a little bit. So he's challenged you with some statements that may be provocative to someone who's been there for 10 years. Right? Why is this new person saying this? But there was a context and a time that he shared some of these facts. The third task is giving the work back to you. It's not going to be some magic wand where he comes up with the solution, but you have to be motivated to go back and say, I can leverage this person to think about a new reality for our organization. Personally, in my life, this has been the biggest Achilles heel, and it's hard to practice this. And so for individuals such as you, Dan, who've not only taken this assignment, but I know you put 20, 30 hours when a typical speech is about 10 hours for someone. And you also did it after taking both the adaptive leadership courses at the Kennedy School. This was really powerful. And I know a few of you have also delivered this speech. In graduate school, again, put yourself in these scenarios around organizational behavior, around cultural change, around communication in difficult situations to really sort of take you a step ahead when those situations arise. Now, we have 5 more speeches of 5 minutes each coming up. But you know, it's a late night, so I've gone, as I mentioned, I went out to Costco, and the bars here are 3 times the price, right? Not that this was cheap. But so I've gone out, I've done it from my budget, so please take 1 each. In fact, I'm going to have the TAs distribute these kind bars so that you get some energy. If you need to take a 5-minute restroom break, you can. But just to ensure 2 things. 1, to ensure that we have the energy for the second half. And 2 is to really do something that we did earlier for someone who deserves it even more than you, Carolee. So we actually have a real birthday in the house. It's Aditi Trehan's birthday, and she has come to watch the show despite friends wanting to have dinner with us. So 1 more time, on 3. On one. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Aditi. Happy birthday to you. Yay! Any words? Thank you. That'll work. Now, there's a trade-off between guns and butter, and there's a trade-off between maximizing students and having faculty and staff. Now, there are 4 classes that run from 5:30 to 7:20. So he is advised, let's have this at 7:30 p.m. But that means that a lot of the faculty and the staff have to go home, things to do. But we have Larry Weiss here in the audience at the very back at 8:40 at night. So let's please give it up for Professor Weiss here at the back. Thank you for joining, Larry, and also representing the staff. There are 2 of the most amazing individuals that I have not just met at Fletcher, but who are here. Back there, Tina Cottle. Few of you got, there we go. She's just got a heart of gold and makes things happen. Thank you for joining us, Tina. And right here, Mary Dulatre. She needs no introduction. Mary's been a student. She has been head of student affairs. She's been a teaching assistant for arts of communication. She's a registrar. Next up, Dean. Okay. I'm doing a good job of putting a lot of people on the spot today. Sorry, Mary. Okay. No, Henry. Your turn is coming. Just kidding. All right. He's going to be right back. All right, moving on with the show here today. Now, we have at our school 2 very special ISSP fellows. What does ISSP stand for? Security Studies Program. Now, ISSP fellows here are a special breed. Apparently, I know you've not mentioned any of this, but my friend said, do you know how hard it is to get here to Fletcher or at the Kennedy School, on a fellowship to do a year here? I was like, wow, I didn't realize those numbers were that staggering. But then when I met these 2 individuals, I completely got it. Not only are they smart, but deeply kind and team-oriented individuals. And we have Mrs. Canasawich also in the, Portia. Portia is also joining us here. For Seth, no pressure, front row.
No.
You know what's going to happen if you don't perform today in the stage. Okay. No, moving on the introduction for Seth. 22 years in active military service. 22 years. Yeah. Has a whole host of interests. He says in his introduction that he loves eating, but thanks to his exercise habits, he's been able to maintain his shape. Right? That's what he shared. And in class, now every piece of work, right? Every piece of work that Seth turned in was tremendous. He did all his speeches despite auditing the scores. And then he did something more. So we have an optional toast, tribute, and eulogy, middle of the semester portion where we go through the content, but you don't have to deliver a speech. And Seth said, no, I want to go back and I want to deliver this letter. We heard a letter to my father. Here's Seth Canasawich and a letter to his grandfather.
Good evening. Tonight we gather here to remember a good man, accept his loss, and gain some perspective on his life. Tonight we remember George C. Littleton. In 1941, George and his soon-to-be wife Marjorie were young Californians living life in the San Jose area. At the outbreak of World War II, at the age of 19, George left college, joined his older brother, and enlisted in the Navy. During the almost 4 years that they were away, he was only able to exchange a handful of letters with family and loved ones. Hard to imagine during our modern age of constant connectivity. Despite the separation, the relationship he had with Marjorie was strong, and when he came home, they were married. After the war, he hung up his sailor blues, put on a coat and tie, and went back to college. There he finished his degree in mechanical engineering and draftsmanship, his lifelong love of aviation spurring him onward. In the 1940s and 1950s, America was a bustling land of innovation and development. The aviation industry was certainly no exception. Companies like Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop were all trying to develop the next great aviation technology. As a recent graduate of the San Jose engineering program, George went to work for Lockheed. While he was there, he had the opportunity to work on several developmental aircraft, such as the first flying wing and the first tilt-rotor plane. George Littleton was a conundrum and a fascination all at once. He could draft technical drawings with one hand and take notes with the other. He could read as quickly backward as he could forward. During the war, after being trapped on a frozen Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska for the better part of a couple months, he gained a lifelong distaste for rice and Spam, neither of which he ate again from 1945 until his death 52 years later. He had a strong love of our country and all the freedoms that come with it. He understood sacrifice and was not one to suffer fools lightly. But he was patient with the headstrong, and he was always an able teacher. The name George C. Littleton may not immediately come to your mind, but he is never far from mine. He was my grandfather. As a boy growing up, he was a huge part of my world. He loved NASA and all aspects of the space exploration program. It was from the upstairs bedroom of his Tennessee house that I watched the shuttle launch unfold in 1986. It was a snowy day when the crew of the Challenger was lost. My grandfather was the man who, before President Reagan would have the chance, explained to a boy how it was important to accept and mourn the loss of life, but not to let it stop us from exploring the heavens and beyond. My grandfather taught me many things. He taught me the value of hard work, how to use a hammer, how to build a swing, how to make the most of what you have and to value what you do, how to take care of your own and always stand up for what's right. These are life lessons that I have carried with me and I hope to pass on to my own children. It's been over 20 years since he's passed, and the loss of it still hits me. It wasn't until I got older I truly understood who he was. When he died in May of 1997, I was deployed halfway around the world. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to give him his Christmas gift. I never got to tell him thank you for all that he had given me. And that's a hurt I've carried alongside his loss. I appreciate the opportunity to share his story with you tonight and to say goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, so between Seth and our next ISSP fellow, we have last year's stellar class participant and this semester's TA, also Juliet Devilart, sharing her value speech on the power of belief. Now, Juliet is such an amazing person because she's done so much in her 22 years, right? And a few more, okay? She's born in Geneva, went to college in London, studied a whole host of different things, including Mandarin, spent a year at the Hopkins Nanjing University in China, where instruction was in Mandarin. She enjoys skiing, she can sing, she plays the ukulele and the piano, and from day one in the class brought a level of dedication and commitment that was rare. It's just fitting that she made faces of community, and she's going to share her value speech on the power of belief.
Have any of you ever tried gardening or growing a plant? I'd like you to imagine that you're doing that now. Close your eyes if it'll help you to imagine it. Do you see how when you water it, it looks greener? How when you place it by the side of a windowsill, it grows taller and turns towards the sun? The more care you put into your plant, the faster it grows and the more beautiful it becomes. Humans are just like plants. Except instead of water and sun, we need warmth and affection. Encouragement is what makes us grow. All of us have fears and insecurities, things that we wish we did better, some things that we don't do because we're afraid of failure. When we don't believe in ourselves, when society doesn't believe in us, that's when we need someone on our side the most. For me, that person was my mum. As a child, I'd been an eager and enthusiastic learner, loved listening in class, loved pleasing my teachers. But in the 6th grade, I started to disconnect. I was daydreaming, looking out of windows. I wasn't listening in class, and my grades were dropping fast. On paper, I was starting to look like a problem child, someone who was behind, someone who maybe needed a little extra help, had to catch up. Only my mum saw through it. She believed in me, and against all odds, she convinced the school principal to move me up a year. In a new and stimulating environment, I was listening again, I was engaged again, and I was happy again. My mum reversed the downward spiral that I was in. And to this day, I see that as a pivotal point in my life. I would not be here today if she had not believed in me then. When we encourage those around us, and when we believe in them, we are giving them the strength to break through those doubts and insecurities and truly achieve their potential. It's easy these days to look at the famous role models that we have around us and think, wow, they're just so good. Am I ever going to make it like that? Does she have what it takes? Does he really have the talent? But each and every one of those people started where we are now. Whether they're an actor, a musician, an athlete, or a politician. It took them years of hard work to get to where they are. But it also took mountains of support from their mentors, their friends, and their families. A plant can't grow without water, and we can't grow without support. I've had the chance over the years to do for others what my mum did for me back then. Sometimes all it takes is a few words, a well-placed hug, a simple, "You got this." And other times, it takes months or years of support. But in each and every case, the power of belief is transformative. So when you next see your friend looking just that little bit doubtful, encourage them. When you see that person that you maybe take a couple of classes with, cross in the corridor every once in a while, looking a little down, encourage them. And when you cross a complete stranger on the street, who you've never even talked to before, and they maybe need a smile, encourage them. Not every one of these moments will be transformative, but I promise you, over a lifetime, at least one will. Thank you.
Juliet, thank you. There's two things to point out. I was talking about earlier 5 minutes, like a song. It's a playlist that you hear, right? But each person here has such a different melody. And this is the trade-off when it comes to guiding, collaborating, teaching on a class on public speaking. We don't want you to conform to a standard. We want you to find your idiosyncratic style and just be comfortable to magnify your strengths here. That's what we're seeing. The other thing is not a single note till date, right? On the first day, if you tell people that, yes, you can, in class, go through a speech with no notes, right? They're shuddering, but one after the other, we're seeing this, and it's going to continue just for our last 3 speeches. Now, how many of you have watched Top Gun? All right. You know Tom Cruise's character, right? Maverick. Now, come here. Come here, man. Okay. Oh, we need a new slide. Yeah, we need the new slide. Yeah, okay, well, it's building up. Okay. What's the difference between Tom Cruise and Matt Culp? He's the real thing, that's right. Right, he's the real thing. Tom Cruise was the fake F-18 pilot. And this gentleman has been an F-18 pilot for 18 years. Okay. Flown combat missions, Iraq, Afghanistan, humanitarian assistance in Japan and Indonesia, also served with NATO for maritime operational standards. Really, one of the biggest catalysts for our class. You energized the group, you synergized the group. Last semester, I see a lot of nods from the TA. It's so hard to decide between your first and your second speech. And Matt, you've also got a couple of high school friends who come here to see you. Yes? Wow, 3 of them. That's amazing. You stuck with this gentleman all these years? Yeah. It was tough. We'll come back at the end of the show for anything that more you want to share. But yes, so our Fletcher's own Tom Cruise, right? Now this speech, though, grace. And there was a theme, you'll see. It's coincidental for those of you who attended last time. There's been a lot of tributes right now, and they just were stellar speeches, so we put them together. Matt Culp is going to share with us his value speech on grace. Please.
So for as long as I can remember, my dad had a beard, kind of like Abraham Lincoln's. But he loved to tell this story of once, when I was little, he shaved it off. And apparently I was terrified of him, and I wanted nothing to do with this imposter in my house. And so he grew it back, and he wore it for the rest of his life. Now, along with the beard, he had this sort of aura of wisdom. He was a biochemistry professor who inhaled books like some people breathe air. And he was kind and funny. And to me, he was a teacher of all things. So when he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, which is similar to Alzheimer's disease, it seemed like the most unfair thing that I can imagine. After this lifetime of learning, my family and I would witness the slow retreat of his exceptional mind. And it would be a journey of years, but one that he would travel with this gentle, brave dignity. Near the end of his life, our family gathered in his home where he was on hospice care. And at this point, the strength of his body had failed him. Bone cancer had left him in pain and robbed him of his mobility. And the dementia had stolen much of his ability to speak. Everything that I had associated with my dad's identity, his strength, his knowledge, his memories, here at the end, all had been slowly stripped away. But the man lying in that bed was still unmistakably my dad. And what remained was this quality I had never put words to before. And that was his grace. And although he'd been unresponsive for days, shortly after we arrived, we experienced the miracle of life's last good day. And one morning, my dad awoke, alive and lucid, and we had him back for a few final hours. And there was laughter and tears, telling stories and holding hands. My son was 8 months old at the time, and he sat on his bed, and he tugged at his beard, and they both laughed, and they gazed at each other for the first time and the last. My dad kept repeating these words, "I love you. I am so grateful." Gratitude for life and love for family. And I realize now that that was the foundation that the rest of my dad's identity had been built on, this foundation of grace. Those words that he spoke would be his last. And when he closed his eyes that afternoon, they'd not reopen. What followed was a vigil of days filled with quiet, simple acts of love. The trimming of a beard, the combing of hair, reading a favorite story, holding ice chips melting to his dry lips. I never knew there were so many ways to say goodbye. And still his grace endured, even in the rattling of his breath and the laboring of his heart, even in the whispers and moments of pain that broke through the morphine. There's a beauty in life that just doesn't fade. And one late night, in our bed, my lovely wife touched my face. "You should go to him." Somehow she knew. And that was grace of a different kind. And I went. And in the cool and quiet of his bedroom, with my forehead pressed to his, I whispered what words of comfort I could find. "I love you, Dad. Thank you. Thank you for life. Thank you for teaching me how to be a dad. We're so proud of you. We're going to be okay." And with fingers resting on paper-thin skin, I could feel the final labors of his heart. He was 73 years old. How many millions of heartbeats in that lifetime? There was an unexpected honor in sharing his last. It's been years since that day, and the memory of that heartbeat still lingers in my fingers. And since that day, I have searched myself and searched my heart to find some measure of my Father's grace, and I've struggled with this idea of it. I believe that it's all around us, but God, it's so elusive at the same time. But in the moments that I can capture it, life changes. And it may sound silly, but colors come alive in the world, and I can smile at strangers, and I can honestly believe that everybody is just simply trying their best. And the differences and the distances between us no longer seem quite so real. And so after a lifetime of teaching, that became my Father's final lesson to his sons. That in all things, if you seek it, grace can be found in just the simple act of living. Thanks.
You know, I have to say, it's really such an honor for us that many of you have chosen this forum to share something in the tributes that you have provided to people close to you. Thank you. That was truly special to capture first the emotion and then to give it words and to do it in the time. Well, there's been a lot of tributes this time to family members. We're going to stay with one more. Switch it around. Lots of tributes. Father to the grandfather. What about the next generation? Right? Here we have Socrates Sorvinos from Greece, a career diplomat. In fact, started diplomacy 2005. Yeah. Been all over the world, a couple of important postings in Europe, and is here now in the mid-career MA program. Socrates also came in a package of two last time with another incredible gentleman from Greece. I don't see him today, but they were just, I don't know, last semester was really special. I hate to call favorite semesters. You guys really made a lot of things happen. and as is the semester. Yes. There's more of them here because they're required. Yeah. Now, Socrates' final speech in the class was his speech on passing the torch. Okay. Let me not say more. Let's please invite Socrates on stage. Yes.
Thank you. I want you to think of a torch relay. One runner covers a distance, and then he passes the torch to the next one, and to the next one, and so on until they reach the finishing line. A torch relay is usually associated with the inauguration of the Olympic Games, but it's so much more than that. It's a symbolic act that represents the passage of knowledge from one human being to another in an eternal struggle for continuity. Time moves on, and all we can do is accept the limits of our human nature and strive to transfer our experience and our wisdom to the younger generations. Clearly, there is an undisputed link between the process of a torch relay and the concept of parenthood. Parents are doing their best so that their kids are properly raised through inspiration, love, devotion, and guidance. And when the time comes for the parents to pass the torch, then the sons and daughters may embark on their own personal journeys. Let me now take you a few years back. Before I say that, I'm a diplomat. I was working approximately 5 years ago in an embassy somewhere in Europe. I had just been promoted, so my boss organized this small reception in order to celebrate the occasion. A few colleagues, some friends, some VIPs, quite a crowd had shown up. I was there with my wife and my 2 daughters, 3 and 5 years old at the time. It was the very first event of this kind, and it was a rather special evening for us. Actually, I had to deliver this speech at some point, and no matter how many times you speak in public, there's always this tension, this restlessness, this feeling of butterflies that are trapped in your stomach, as they say. I got over it eventually. I had the safe delivery of the speech, no risky jokes whatsoever. I finished, a round of applause, I'm feeling relaxed, I'm ready to enjoy the rest of the evening. But that was not the case. I have my boss who has these unique off-the-cuff ideas once again. Hey, Socrates, do you think that Lila may sing something for us? Whoops. Lila is my elder daughter. She stands right in front of me. She's 5 years old, tiny, wearing a floral dress, hair in a ponytail, and that horrified look in her eyes that I will never forget. I approached her cautiously. Hey, Lila, do you think that you can sing something, darling? She nods. I can smell the fear. Are you sure? Second nod. This time she means it. Okay, let's do this. I'm back in my position, and she has started slowly to head towards the center of the room. Tiny, vulnerable, but somehow determined. I know that she can sing. She stands there, concentration, final breath, and starts. First notes cut the silence. It's an old song about summertime. After a few seconds, everybody's aware that she can sing. She gets more relaxed over time, and then the magic starts to happen. I look at her, she looks back at me, and she sings like there's no one else in the room. I'm feeling that she tries to honor her dad with her voice, my little girl. Sweet, fragile, fearless. Some fancy high notes, nice outro, and the ending is glorious. Cheers and applause in the room. She runs toward me, I hug her, I have her in my arms, I forget everything about networking, VIPs, promotions, and all that stuff. I'm just living the moment, me as a father and my precious daughter. The butterflies that used to be in my stomach are right now all over the place. It's a pure snapshot of joy and happiness. I whisper in her ear, well done, baby, that was great. She smiles, her eyes are glowing, she puts her little arms around me, she gives me a kiss and says, Daddy, I love you so much. And it's at this very moment that I realize the essence of being a parent, the essence of getting ready to pass the torch. Thank you.
Thank you, Socrates. So, with his own voice, right? Finding your voice. Socrates, represents many of the the individuals here that we get at Fletcher, where they don't use English all the time. English is not your first language. The thought of coming on stage and delivering a speech. Right? But I was telling you, I see no correlation objectively between grades earned and familiarity with English. It's really, it's earnest work towards this can really deliver something so beautiful, right? Socrates, sincerely, thank you very much. Now, this is, it's been such a, I guess, a coincidence, an accident for me getting into this position, but there's something that has very naturally sustained me to teach this course so many times and have the treat of listening to this, and getting paid for it, right, year after year. And sometimes people said, well, what is the most impactful speech you heard? And I said, well, that's, I can't really answer that question. There have been so many through the years, right? And this is a very subjective question too, what really impacts and resonates with you. Well, I'll tell you, when I was at the Friedman School last semester, we were in this room and I heard this speech. I mean, I felt there was something truly rare, right? Something just that really changed my outlook on things. And Rachel Baer from the Friedman School has joined us today. She just got off a flight, got in here at 6:30 to recreate the speech. Now, a bit about Rachel. She was working in nutrition, communication. You've done everything from counseling to being on-air talent, spent some time with Nestle in Atlanta, or in LA with Nestle, and then also time in Atlanta, Georgia. She's a natural leader and in this group that I experienced last semester. And her speech today is entitled Grief and Grit. For waiting the entire time, our very last speaker of tonight, let's please warmly welcome Rachel Baer.
August always comes with mixed emotions for me. My birthday's on August 28th, and as a native of Southern California, I've always considered myself a summer girl. But August also holds an anniversary that I won't soon forget. On August 4th, 2011, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, when I got a call that would change my life. It's time to come home, my dad said. That night, I quit my job and booked a one-way ticket back to Los Angeles, just like we'd always talked about, if it came to this. At this point, my 19-year-old brother, David, had been battling cancer for 3 years. At 6'6", Dave was a hotshot athlete in our town, known for a sense of humor to match his towering height. But at 16 years old, he traded his senior year of high school for stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer. In the 3 years that followed, he went through 2 bone marrow transplants, 2 rediagnoses, and spent over 300 nights in the hospital. But in the end, it wasn't even cancer that would take his life. After years of chemotherapy treatments and the blood transfusions that they required, Dave's liver was failing. When I got home, we had 16 more days together as a family of 4. And on August 20th, 2011, Dave died. My hand was on his heart when it stopped beating. 8 days later, we held Dave's memorial service on my 23rd birthday. And because grief is weird, I don't even remember crying. I wore neon green, his favorite color. I smiled, I gave a speech. But as the adrenaline wore off in the days that followed, that was when the real work began. Many of you know this all too well. C.S. Lewis once said that grief is like a steaming cup of hot tea. Drink it too quickly and it can scald you, leaving lasting burns. But drink it too slowly and it can become cold and bitter, robbing you of its healing effects. We live in a culture that is painfully uncomfortable with grief. We try to avoid it, stay busy, move on. But what I want to tell you tonight is that if you'll let it, the process of grief can produce something good. In the hazy years that followed Dave's death, I found the greatest comfort in people who had survived their own stories of loss. They were the ones that asked me to tell them stories about Dave, just because they knew I missed saying his name. They were the ones that stuck with my family when it took us not months, but years to learn how to function as a family of 3. And they're the ones that hold me even today when watching siblings together still makes me cry. Seeing firsthand the strength that the process of grief had created in them made me start to wonder if perhaps even pain can sweeten a life. I love the word grit. In the dictionary, it's synonymous with words like endurance and resilience, but those words feel too clean, too sterile to me. Grit acknowledges the messiness of grief that promises to produce in us something different, that honors what we lost, but can make us better than who we were. So to those of you tonight that have gone through grief and gotten grit, what I want you to hear from me is that your stories are invaluable. The sensitivity, empathy, and intuition that the process of grief has created in you has meant the world to people like me. It was your stories that gave me hope that a day could come where the most painful experience in my life could be useful, even healing to somebody else. I will never believe that losing Dave was good. But the process of grief that followed produced something good, something gritty, something I think Dave would be proud of. Thank you.
All right, so 11 speeches, 5 minutes, range of topics, 5 minutes for you. Any thoughts, any voices, any questions to share? We have some mics we can just get. Any reflections on your part? Takes the first person to get going, right? Yes, Molly.
Thank you all. It was wonderful to hear some of the speeches that I was privileged to hear back in the fall, but just some heavy hitters tonight, some also great reframes. No, I'm really always so impressed by my peers and colleagues and the stories you're willing to share, so thank you.
Yeah, and on that note, I will say this is obviously our stars from here, but this woman right here, Molly, has been with me for 4 semesters, 2-time TA, stellar standout class participant, and she came by today after class just to help out with miking and so forth. And I tell you, your light will always shine with us, Molly. So thank you. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts, perspectives? Yeah. Alex? Great.
For the first time in my life, I attend something like this, and I didn't expect to hear such emotional speeches here, that I can really relate to many of those. So thank you guys very much, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Any other thoughts? Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Steve G. I'm the State Department fellow here. I just wanted to thank everyone for your speeches. They were incredibly touching, incredibly personal, and really moving, and I'm glad I came.
Anything else? Howie, I want to thank you for coming. How was I 5 years ago, or whatever it was?
Do you want me to say?
No, I don't want
that
you to
was?
say anything.
I just want to thank all the speakers, first of all. And I think it's refreshing that, sometimes people can kind of go on and not get to a point. And not being in this field, so to speak, I can honestly say that there's something to be said about taking 5 minutes and being able to convey a real strong sense of passion and emotion and a deepness to all of your talks. So I really appreciate hearing all that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Howie. And you have no idea. I mean, we have literally individuals here, like I think Arkady bugged me 4 or 5 times. I'm not sure, should I do this right now? Should I be in this class? Not. And, yeah. I mean,
I'll have to. It seems like doing these speeches is almost like skydiving, right? You're kind of on the plane up there, and you've got an idea of what it's going to be like, and then until you really do it, then you understand what the experience is. So, I think I can imagine the extent of almost a sense of freedom in being able to go up there and speak.
You can pass the mic to one of the 3 high school friends that Matt had. You said that you'll have 4 high school friends, right? That something to say about Tom Cruise here?
Yeah, actually, we all signed non-disclosure agreements, so we can't really say much about Matt. But what I will say about the speakers is every single speech had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And every single one was chock full of things that you would want to write on your bulletin board. So when you get up in the morning, you think about these things. And you think about them throughout the course of your day, and eventually they become part of your life. So thank you all.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So I was feeling sorry for myself recently because I was writing a paper and I found that the sentence had about 10 words, each of which had about 5 syllables. And I thought, people don't really speak this way. So what comes to my mind is your messages were really simple, incredibly authentic, and so powerful. That's my first thought. My second thought is it requires a lot of trust to get up and share your true self. That's the second thing. And the third is thank you. So the third thing is thank you. The fourth is how does my mascara look? Because I cried through every single one. You made me cry every time. Thank you. No, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful words.
And to conclude, thank you for continuing to put this on. No, I don't know if more people can say, but thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Molly just wants to get out of here. But no, not the last thanks. So just on that note, a thank you to the camera folk who've been here last time. Thank you for really wonderful coverage last time. The video camera, we had Anthony Schultz, who couldn't make it today to take photography because he had a last-minute flight change. And Sebastian? Sam, I'm sorry, I didn't even know, but he chipped in at the very last minute to take some photographs for us, as did a couple of my students when I sent out. So thank you for that. And we're 25 minutes after time, but you stayed till the very last speech. And as lecturers, we don't do that well, but all of you who stayed, another kind bar for all of you, okay? And we're going to go get a drink, so I'm going to buy a round for everyone here who spoke, but we're going to go to PJ Ryan's for a half hour, 40 minutes. So if you want to join us, speak to some of the stars, you're most welcome. But sincerely, thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Okay.